Now it's time to focus in on the quarterbacks, and it's a battle between two of the best in the league. However, injuries make QB props not so straightforward this year. Mahomes is dealing with an ankle injury, and Hurts has a shoulder injury. Let's send it over to Josh Lander and Nate Weitzer, hosts of the Lines Coast to Coast podcast, to see how they are tackling quarterback props on Sunday.
We are looking at some Super Bowl props here, Nate, for these quarterbacks that we've got, probably the two best players and most exciting guys to look at in this game. We're going to go a couple of Hurts props here, a couple Mahomes props, maybe some funky stuff that we're looking at if you want to get some giant odds and some juice back here in this Super Bowl. Go ahead and kick us off, Nate, with your first Jalen Hurts prop.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried to target the passing props based on just game flow and run funnel defenses, but I think this is a matchup where Hurts really should use his legs more than anything. 39 yards against San Francisco's top-tier run defense. They obviously controlled that game from start to finish. But really, the number one thing I'm looking at with this matchup is Philly's going to be able to control the line of scrimmage on both sides. There's absolutely nothing teams can do to stop the power formation that they use at the goal line on short yardage. So I think 11 attempts for Hurts at even money is good bet. I mean, that's what he got against San Francisco. I do think the Eagles will be ahead most of this game. I don't think Kansas City can stop the run. I mean, they couldn't contain Joe Burrow. They allowed the fifth most rushing yards to QBs on the season. And in the three previous playoff games before that Bengals game, they were giving up 5.3 yards per carry. We know Philly's a run-heavy team, obviously, and Hurts is just, even more important than that stable of three running backs they use. So 48.5 rushing yards is up to that. It was originally a little bit lower on some sites, but now pretty much the market standard at MGM minus 115 odds. And for him to have those attempts, even better. And then there's some touchdown stuff that you could look at, with 2 touchdowns being plus 500. I don't think that's out of the question. Look, if they get it down to the 1, it's not really a secret who's going to get the ball, and you can't stop it.
You can't. Yeah, you can't stop the best 4th and 1, team in the history of the NFL. We saw that in the last game. I like all this with you as well. I mean, definitely the attempts at that even money there. I really like, the attempts last week. I think you probably would have seen a few more if this was a closer game. I don't think they wanted to necessarily put Hurts in a position to have to gain yardage for them once they're already up a couple scores against a team that doesn't have a quarterback in one of the wildest games we've ever seen in an NFC Championship game for sure. But yeah, I think the attempts are going to be there a bit more. They're going to do a little bit of what we talked about last week against San Francisco, which is neutralize that pass rush. Obviously, they can probably throw on those DBs, but why even put yourself in a situation to get that Chris Jones and company going? So moving on to Hurts and some passing stuff here. I'm actually going under. I think probably lines up a bit with what our game theory here is, and minus 115 on MGM. He's gone under this number twice this postseason. Not that he really needed to really, put it through the air after going up big early in both those games and staying on top. He hasn't really even topped 200 yards, and really he only went over 245 5 times this season, the last one being back in December. And if you look at who he went over 245 yards against, we're talking about Tennessee, the worst pass defense in terms of yards per game allowed, Minnesota, the 31st team there, and then Chicago, Pitt, both 15th and 13th in yards per game allowed. So, Washington had a good defense early, and he still was able to get over that. But I think that there's opportunity here against, that defensive backfield for KC. It's not necessarily great, but they're still only allowing 6 yards per pass, 221 yards per game, and that's really just thanks to the second highest sack rate in the league this season, and they're much more vulnerable versus the run. So obviously we're targeting a bit more for one of the best run teams in the league in Philly to be able to do that a bit more and not necessarily need to go deep, even though they've also got incredible wide receiver room over there. But 19th in opponents' yards per rush for KC this season. And then, like I said, the Eagles ran the ball the most times per game, more than 33 times this season in each of these games, over 150 yards rushing per game, and they're still boasting that the best offensive line in the NFL this season. So all those run guys in company, I think it's a good opportunity for them to get rushing yards and not necessarily even need him to get over that 246.5.
Yeah, I mean, same theory really with under on the completions or the attempts for Hurts. It's a game flow bet that you think the Eagles will be in control, and it will be, I find it dangerous to think it'll be exactly like how they just rolled through the Giants and the Niners. I think it will be a much more competitive game, which is why I'm maybe a little shying away from the yardage, because these teams did play in the regular season. last year, and it was a total shootout. KC's not great on either against the pass or the run, and they have some injuries back there. But the Eagles, when it comes down to it, want to just run the ball, and they want to protect Hurts in that shoulder and just kind of pound the rock. So yeah, I think you're on point there. Switching over to Mahomes, I think we're both on the same page in terms of just volume for him.
Yeah.
You said the attempts. I'm going completions, 25.5, pretty much even money at Caesars. And he's hit that in at least in 6 of his last 7 playoff games, the exception being against Jacksonville, where he totally messed up his ankle and was hopping around there. But last time in the Super Bowl against Tampa Bay while running for his life, 26 for 49. And, it might be another situation like that with this Eagles pass rush. I mean, either way, KC's just rushing attack is non-existent. 42 yards against Cincy. You look at 46 against Denver and 77 against Seattle in 2 of their last 3 regular season. And Mahomes had 29 completions in those last 2 against Cincy and Denver. Good run defenses. I know Philly's like even better against the pass than the run on the season. They have excellent corners, but the Chiefs, with 2 weeks with Andy Reid, time to scheme guys open. Mahomes will find different receivers. They'll use those tight ends. They'll use McKinnon, and he'll just rack up completions. Everything's going to go through him. They had a 70% pass play rate even with him on the bum ankle and pulled out that game. And there should be plenty of possessions because Philly's first in neutral pace, and they're even 9th in pace once they have a 7-point lead. So if we, again, think the Chiefs are coming from behind, that's why we like the volume for Mahomes.
Yeah, I mean, I have no reason to disagree with anything you're saying because, like you said, I'm going over attempts, and those are an astronomical 39.5. I kind of hope he's not running for his life to ensure that we can get these completions and pass attempts up. And if he starts actually putting together, 8-yard rushes, 10-yard rushes, and those chunk yards there, his 18.5 rushing yards kind of seems low for a Super Bowl game, like you said, where he's going to have the ball in his hands a ton of times. And hopefully he's able to avoid guys like Hassan Riddick and who is just a quarterback eater at this point because he's going to be able to, I mean, he's a little bit more mobile, obviously, than the guys we've been seeing him, this Eagles team go up against in the postseason. So I think he'll be fine there because he did look fine. He had that one rush for 8 yards. Looked fine. I know it was only 1, but at least he didn't look hobbled enough to be able to get out. And I think the pass attempts, keeping it there, like I thought about the completions, it's a bit better juice at even money versus the minus 108 for 39.5 pass attempts. Plus 39.5 pass attempts is much more intimidating than the number 25.5 for completions, I think, for Mahomes. But when it matters, you're going to put the ball in Pat Mahomes' hands, right? And that's been true in games that matter this season. It's been true in the last 2 Super Bowls, 42 attempts and then 49 attempts in the last one that they played in. So, he's going to have the ball in his hands. You're not going to take it out of that. And he can run, but I don't think they want him to have to do that quite as much. He's had 7 games this season with 40-plus pass attempts. All but 1 came in November or later, kind of adding to the fact that they were playing a bit more closer games. There was that streak where they just didn't cover but kept winning, as we continue to talk about in our prop show as well. And so, like I said, they all came in later times in the season when they needed to really wrap up that 1 seed. And once again, you put the ball in Patrick Mahomes' hands. All those games were 1 score or less, just the exception being the game against the Rams, where you don't run on the Rams, right? So the games that he did have 40-plus pass attempts, their average margin of victory was 3.8. In games with less than 40, we're talking about an average margin of victory of 10.8. They just didn't need him to throw. And they're going to need him to throw. It's the Super Bowl. There's no way they're blowing out the Eagles. I think if anybody's on blowout alert a bit more, it could be them if the Eagles control the ball a ton more. I don't see it going, that way in either direction necessarily. But I do think that the fact that it's going to be close is all going to correlate to Mahomes throwing the ball 42, 45 times in that range, much more likely than any time in the 30s.
Yeah, it all flows back to what we think, which is that the Eagles are going to control the game. And as long as the Chiefs are trying to play catch up, Mahomes is going to be dropping back a lot. Also, the rushing yards are pretty good. Found good odds for the rush attempts, plus 115 for him to rush 4 times. And that ankle is going to be much better in 2 weeks. So that's another one we're looking at and using that odds finder tool to find the best value at all books. And that's all the time we have for this one. Everybody, good luck with your bets in the Super Bowl.